Imagine you are about to enter a battle. On one side, enemies armed with swords, spears, and arrows. On the other, you and your army, ready to fight. The problem is that a well-placed blow to the head can end everything in an instant. So, what to do? Put something sturdy on to protect yourself. This is how helmets emerged, as an essential defense for warriors throughout history. They were not just accessories, but rather the difference between life and death in many combats. Since ancient times, soldiers from different peoples created their own helmet models, each adapted to the type of warfare they faced. Some used simple materials, like reinforced leather, while others relied on metals such as bronze, iron, and even steel. The more durable, the better the protection, but this also meant more weight on the head. It was a delicate balance between safety and mobility. The first helmets were quite rudimentary. Many peoples used pieces of hardened leather or even bones to cover their heads. One of the oldest and most curious models was the Mycenaean helmet made with boar tusks. Yes, real tusks. Soldiers would sew the tusks onto a leather base, creating a protection that seemed effective at the time. But compared to the metal helmets that would come later, it was not that resilient. As armies evolved, helmets also became more sophisticated. The Celts, for example, developed a model that caught the attention of the Romans, the Montefortino. This helmet, with a conical shape and protection for the sides of the face, was lightweight, durable, and easy to produce. The Romans liked it so much that they adopted the design and made some improvements, turning it into one of the most iconic helmets of their army. Another very famous helmet was the Norman one, a simple yet efficient model. It had a conical shape and a protective bar descending in the middle of the face to shield the nose. Although it was excellent defense against direct blows from swords and spears, it left the neck vulnerable. Even so, it was widely used by medieval knights, who needed something sturdy but that wouldn't hinder their vision and movements. The Greeks also had their own versions, and one of the most impressive was the Illyrian helmet. Made of bronze, it provided excellent protection for the head and face, but the early versions had a serious problem: they muffled the ears too much, making hearing difficult. This could be disastrous in the midst of battle, as hearing commands and approaching enemies was crucial. Over time, improvements were made to address this issue. Another legendary model from ancient Greece was the Corinthian helmet. If you've ever seen statues of Greek warriors, you've surely seen this helmet. It covered the entire head and face, leaving only small openings for the eyes and mouth. This made it excellent against direct blows, but it had two major problems: it hindered hearing and could become unbearably hot inside. Therefore, soldiers often lifted it off their heads when not fighting. In the Middle Ages, a curious model began to gain popularity: the kettle hat. It literally looked like a large iron hat with wide brims. The reason was simple: to protect soldiers from blows coming from above, such as arrows shot by archers. This design was so effective that it continued to be used until World War I, proving that sometimes, simple solutions are the best. On the other side of the world, Japanese samurai developed one of the most distinctive helmets in history, the kabuto. Unlike European models, it had a highly articulated design and a flexible neck guard, allowing the warrior to move with agility without losing protection. Additionally, many kabutos were decorated with horns, fearsome masks, and other details to intimidate enemies even before the fight began. The Romans, masters at improving inventions, took ideas from several of these helmets and created some of the most efficient models of antiquity. One example is the Gallic Roman helmet, an evolution of the Montefortino, which added even more protection for the neck and sides of the face. It became so iconic that when thinking of Roman soldiers, this type of helmet is what comes to mind. As weapons evolved, helmets also needed to change. When gunpowder emerged, medieval models, designed to withstand swords and spears, became obsolete. Lighter and more strategic helmets began to be developed, as the new threat came from fast and powerful shots that easily pierced iron. Even in modern times, helmets remain essential. Military personnel, police officers, and even workers use modern versions for protection against impacts, explosions, and falls. The principle remains the same: to protect the head and ensure that the user can continue their mission safely. The history of helmets shows how humans have always sought ways to protect themselves without losing mobility. Each model reflects the context of its time and the challenges faced by the warriors of that era. From simple leather helmets to sophisticated modern designs, they have always been an essential piece for survival in combat. In the ancient world, helmets were not just items of protection, but also symbols of status and identity. Each civilization developed its own style, from the elaborate Greek helmets to the sturdy Roman models. Among them, one of the most iconic and impressive was the kabuto, worn by the samurai of Japan. So, the next time you see a helmet, whether it belongs to a soldier, a worker, or a motorcyclist, remember that this simple item carries centuries of evolution, strategy, and innovation. After all, protecting the head has always been a priority. Before we start exploring the next topic, take a moment to check if you are subscribed to the channel, because what comes next is a series of amazing videos that will help you better understand the history of Rome and how it can inspire your personal journey. Don't miss any content. In ancient times, when soldiers needed head protection but had not yet mastered the use of metals to create sturdy helmets, they had to be creative. This is how the Mycenaean boar helmet came to be. Instead of iron or bronze, it was made with boar tusks attached to a base of leather and felt. This choice was not only practical, but also strategic, as hunting a boar was a dangerous task, and thus wearing its tusks on the helmet displayed courage and status. The Mycenaeans, who lived over 3,000 years ago, wore this helmet during the famous Trojan War. They believed that in addition to providing some protection, the helmet could also intimidate enemies. After all, seeing a warrior with a head covered in sharp tusks was anything but reassuring. The wild appearance perfectly matched the battle spirit of the time. However, despite being innovative for its time, this helmet had its disadvantages. The protection it offered was limited compared to the metal helmets that would emerge later. A strong blow from a sword or spear could easily pierce the leather and reach the warrior. Even so, for those soldiers, any protection was better than facing combat with a completely unprotected head. Moreover, it had another advantage: it was lightweight. Unlike the metal helmets that would come later, it did not weigh heavily on the head, allowing soldiers to move with greater agility. This made a difference in long battles, where endurance and speed could determine victory or defeat. As the centuries passed, armies began to understand that metal was a much more efficient choice for protection, and helmets evolved. Nevertheless, the boar helmet remains an impressive example of the ingenuity of ancient warriors, showing how they used available resources to prepare for war. It also reminds us that, at that time, a soldier was not just a fighter, but someone who carried their culture, bravery, and even their history in every piece of their armor. A long time ago, when warriors needed protection for their heads, a helmet emerged that would become one of the most famous in history, the Montefortino helmet. Created by the Celts, it attracted so much attention that the Romans decided to adopt it for their own soldiers. After all, a good warrior knows that the best strategy is not just to invent something new, but also to learn from others. The design of this helmet was simple yet very effective. It had a conical shape, meaning it was slightly pointed at the top. This helped deflect blows from swords and spears, preventing them from striking directly on the soldier's skull. Additionally, it featured a neck guard, which prevented attacks from behind and kept rain from dripping inside the helmet, which was an unexpected bonus. On the sides, the Montefortino had plates that protected the warrior's cheeks. This was essential because in battle, any blow to the side of the face could be fatal. These plates helped keep the soldier safe without impairing his vision or ability to breathe. This helmet was so resilient and efficient that it became one of the favorites of the Romans during the Republic and the Roman Empire. The soldiers, known as legionaries, relied on it to face enemies in different parts of the world. And since the Romans were always at war, it was essential to have a helmet that offered protection without being too heavy or uncomfortable. Another advantage of the Monte Fortino was its durability. Made of bronze or iron, it could withstand many impacts before needing repairs. This meant that soldiers did not have to worry about frequently replacing their helmets, which was a significant advantage in long military campaigns. Over time, the helmet was improved and gave rise to other models, but its influence remained for centuries. It was one of the first helmets to combine practicality and protection in a balanced way, which helped the Romans become one of the most feared military forces in history. So, did you know how the helmets used by soldiers in ancient battles looked? Throughout history, different civilizations created their own models, each designed to face the challenges of their time. But how would these helmets compare to modern protective gear? Leave your comment and tell us if you are already familiar with this story. What do you think the impact of these innovations was on the battlefield? If you found the topic interesting, share your opinion and help spread this knowledge. We want to know what you think. In a time of brave knights and intense battles, the Normans needed a helmet that would protect them without hindering their movements. Thus, the Norman helmet was born, a model with a very characteristic design. It had a conical top and a metal bar descending down the middle of the face to protect the nose. This extra piece was very important, as it prevented direct blows from injuring this sensitive part of the face. The Norman knights wore this helmet in their conquests and battles, making it a common sight on the battlefields of the Middle Ages. Its conical shape was not just an aesthetic detail, but rather an engineering trick. It helped deflect blows from swords and spears, preventing the force of the impact from being fully absorbed by the warrior's skull. Moreover, the Norman helmet was lightweight and simple to produce, making it a practical choice for armies that needed to equip many soldiers. It offered good protection for the head and face, allowing warriors to keep their vision and breathing unobstructed, something essential during an intense fight. However, it was not perfect. One of its biggest problems was the lack of protection for the neck. If an enemy managed to strike below the helmet, the warrior became vulnerable to fatal cuts. To compensate for this weakness, many knights combined the Norman helmet with a chainmail, covering the neck and shoulders with small interwoven iron rings. This helmet model became so famous that it continued to be used for centuries and even inspired other types of more advanced medieval helmets. It was a symbol of the age of knights and can still be seen in paintings, films, and even in family crests that carry on the tradition of the Norman warriors. In the time of Greek and Etruscan warriors, a good helmet could mean the difference between returning home as a hero or not returning at all. The Illyrian helmet was one of the favorite choices of soldiers during that era. Made entirely of bronze, it offered more protection than many other models, covering a large part of the head while leaving only the face exposed. This meant that direct blows to the forehead or the side of the head were less dangerous, making the warrior much more resilient in battle. Its robust design made it quite popular, especially among the Greeks, who were always involved in conflicts and needed reliable equipment. It was strong and durable, capable of withstanding the impact of swords, spears, and even arrows. Furthermore, being made of bronze, a rust-resistant material, it did not easily deteriorate, even after many battles. But not everything was perfect. The early versions of the Illyrian helmet had a flaw that could be fatal in combat. It completely covered the ears and had no openings for sound to pass through. This made it very difficult for the warrior to hear commands from their leader or to notice an enemy approaching from the sides. Imagine being in the middle of a battle and not being able to hear the shouts of your allies or the sound of footsteps drawing near. This could be a significant problem, as hearing was essential for reacting quickly to dangers. Over time, the craftsmen who made these helmets recognized this disadvantage and began to modify the design. Newer versions started to feature small openings on the sides, allowing warriors to hear better what was happening around them. This made the Illyrian helmet even more effective and ensured its popularity for a long time. Despite its initial limitations, this helmet marked the history of military equipment and influenced other models that came after. It demonstrated that, in war, protection was important, but hearing danger approaching could be even more essential. The ancient Greek warriors knew that a good helmet could mean the difference between life and death in battle. Among the various models used at the time, the Corinthian helmet stood out as one of the most iconic and effective. Made entirely of bronze, it covered the entire head and face of the warrior, leaving only small openings for the eyes and a narrow slit for the mouth. This closed design provided exceptional protection against sword strikes, spears, and even arrows. In addition to physical protection, the Corinthian helmet also played an important psychological role. Its aggressive and imposing shape made the warrior appear more threatening on the battlefield, demoralizing enemies even before the confrontation began. To reinforce this intimidation, many soldiers customized their helmets, painting details in red or black, or adding plumes on top to increase their height and stand out among others. However, despite its defensive efficiency, this helmet had some significant disadvantages. As it completely covered the ears, it impaired the user's hearing, making communication and awareness of surrounding threats difficult. A warrior might not hear orders from his commanders or, worse yet, fail to notice an enemy approaching from the sides. This problem was especially dangerous in chaotic battles, where being attentive to the sounds around could save lives. Another major challenge was thermal discomfort. Bronze, although durable, heated up quickly under the intense Mediterranean sun. In prolonged battles, the heat inside the helmet became unbearable, causing the warrior to sweat excessively. To alleviate this problem, many soldiers would lift the helmet or remove it momentarily when not directly engaged in combat. Over time, adaptations were made to make the helmet more functional. Some later versions had larger openings on the sides to improve hearing, while others maintained the original design but were only worn during combat. Even so, the Corinthian helmet remained popular for centuries and was widely adopted by different Greek city-states, including Athens and Sparta. This model also influenced various other helmets throughout military history. Its iconic design inspired versions used by the Romans and even by medieval warriors in some regions of Europe. Today, the Corinthian helmet is remembered not only as a symbol of protection but as a striking piece of Greek military culture, often depicted in films, sculptures, and works of art that honor the ancient warriors of ancient Greece. Before we move on to the next topic, I noticed that you haven't liked this video yet. This is super important because it helps YouTube promote our content to more people, allowing us to continue bringing you more information to help you. The kettle hat was a helmet quite different from others, as instead of covering the entire head with a closed shape, it had a wide brim that extended around, resembling a large metal hat. It emerged in the Middle Ages and was used by soldiers from various armies throughout the centuries. Its main advantage was to protect against attacks from above, such as blows from swords, axes, and even arrows shot from the tops of castle walls. But the most impressive thing is that this helmet continued to be used for a long time, even reaching World War I. Even with the advancement of firearms, its brim still helped deflect shrapnel from explosions and even glancing shots. Soldiers fighting in the trenches liked this model because it offered good defense without compromising vision and hearing, unlike more closed helmets, which could limit awareness of the surroundings. Another positive point was its simplicity. As it did not require a complicated shape, it was easy to manufacture and cheaper than other heavy helmets, allowing entire armies to be equipped without great difficulties. Additionally, its design allowed soldiers to wear it for long periods without excessive discomfort, as it was lighter and more ventilated than many closed helmets. However, the kettle hat had its disadvantages. By not covering the sides and back of the head, it left these areas vulnerable to direct attacks. A well-placed blow to the face or neck could be fatal, so soldiers needed to stay alert and use shields or other forms of protection to compensate for this limitation. Even with this flaw, its versatility made it a popular choice in various battles. It was especially useful for archers and soldiers who needed to move quickly without carrying excessive weight on their heads. As it did not obstruct vision as much, it allowed the warrior to have a wide field of view, which was essential to avoid surprise attacks and position themselves better in combat. Over time, helmets evolved and new models emerged, but the kettle hat was never completely forgotten. Even today, it appears in museums, medieval films, and even in historical reenactments, being remembered as one of the most iconic helmets in military history. The kabuto was an incredible helmet used by the samurai of Japan. Unlike many European helmets, which were heavy and closed, the kabuto was designed to offer both protection and agility. Samurai needed to move quickly in combat, and this helmet allowed them to fight with skill without sacrificing defense. One of the most impressive features of the kabuto was its neck protector, called shikoro. It was not a single piece of rigid metal, but rather several articulated plates, making the helmet more flexible and comfortable. This helped the samurai turn their head easily, essential for those who needed to be aware of their surroundings in the midst of battle. In addition to protection and mobility, the kabuto also had an impressive appearance. Many of them were decorated with powerful symbols, such as giant horns, fearsome masks, and even drawings of fierce animals. This was not just for style, the intimidating appearance was part of the war strategy, as an enemy who saw a samurai with a decorated kabuto might hesitate before attacking. Another fascinating detail is that the kabuto was not only for combat. It was a symbol of status. High-ranking samurai often had richly ornamented helmets, while common soldiers wore simpler versions. Furthermore, the kabuto had a firm attachment to the head, using a fabric tied under the chin to prevent it from falling during the fight. Over time, even after the end of the samurai era, the kabuto continued to be an important symbol of Japanese culture. To this day, it appears in museums, films, and even games, being one of the most recognizable helmets in history. And thus we come to the end of this journey through the most strategic and deadly helmets used in ancient combat. As we have seen, each of these helmets was not just a piece of protection, but a true symbol of power, status, and military innovation. From the early models made of leather and boar tusks to the elaborate metal helmets of samurai and legionaries, they all reflected the constant need for adaptation and survival on the battlefield. Throughout history, armies have always sought to improve their equipment, and helmets were essential to protect warriors from swords, spears, arrows, and even crushing blows. The design of each one took into account not only defense but also the mobility, vision, and comfort of the soldier. Some models became so iconic that they influenced the development of armor for centuries. It is impressive to think that, even with all the technology available today, the basic principles of ancient helmets are still used in modern equipment, such as those used by soldiers, firefighters, and even athletes. The evolution may have changed the materials and design, but the need for protection remains as essential as it was in antiquity. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue exploring more curiosities about military strategies, historical battles, and war equipment, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. This way, you won't miss any new content. Thank you for watching until now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep receiving the next content. Until the next video.